So let's back out a little bit here and let me talk next about just the game requirements. I haven't been too concerned about this because we've been kind of building the games together, but with a month out or so till they're in, I just want to kind of go through the pieces that your group will be submitting. And a lot of them are already well underway. So hopefully this isn't going to stress anyone out, but because it shouldn't. We still have a month. We're still good. So in terms of what you're gonna be turning in when it's due, which is basically the end of the course, fully developed instructional design plan that includes analysis, design, and development, the ADD of the ADDIE model. Um, at this point, most of that should basically be done. We've been doing that in pieces in the wiki. I know, again, some of the groups have been doing it on their own in another document. Just, again, make sure that you're transferring that information over because I'll be looking at the wiki for that. So, at this point, analysis should be way done by this point. Most of the design should be done at this point. You should really be working in the development. So there's not, aside from the development, most of that piece of it should already be done. It's just going to be a matter of if you are making any changes or adjustments to the game as you go, make sure that the ID plan reflects those changes. So somebody gives you a suggestion for something and you incorporate it, just make sure that you update the plan. So that's piece one. Piece two, which we talked about over the last couple of weeks, is the flow chart. All right, I do want to see that as a piece of this, and that should really be happening kind of in conjunction with the next thing, which is the set of rules. The one should inform the other. If you know there's a rule you want to use, then chart what that would look like in the flow chart, and that's the way that you can check to make sure that the rule isn't creating some weird loop or dead end in your game flow. So the one is the way to check the other. Or if you're unsure about what rules you need to write, look at your flow chart, and basically you just have to address anywhere an action occurs in that flow chart. Just ask yourself, do we need to tell people that this is something they need to do at this point? And then those become your rules. Here's what you do first, then you decide about this, then you do this, and then you do this, and then the next player goes. So those two things are going to kind of work hand in hand with each other. So the flow chart should support and reflect the rules of the game. And then the rules should be reflected in the flow chart. For the flow chart, when you finally submit it to me, that can be either in print if you want to do it on actual paper, or it could be electronic. So if you've used something like a Drawio or something like that, you could either link me to it, or probably the better thing to do would be to print it electronically, like turn it into a PDF or something, and then that would be submitted electronically. So it doesn't really matter as long as somehow I'm getting the completed flow chart. The set of rules and the guidelines for the game should be in hard paper copy form, just like if you'd gone to the game store and bought the game and you opened it up and there's the set of rules. They should, I'm not going to have a ton of guidelines in terms of it's got to be in 10-point font and all of this, but I am going to be looking that some effort is put into making sure that the rules are formatted in a way that makes them understandable. Okay? Yeah.
As far as the rules, like for us, we're working like the 6-year-olds. So do you want the rules in language for 6-year-olds, or like because the way we had written it was more for like the instructor?
You might want to have sort of two. I mean, you're going to want to.
Maybe more.
You're going to want to have a set of rules that the kids can understand. If maybe it's an extra recess or an indoor recess, and they go grab this thing off the shelf and want to just play it, something that will be developmentally appropriate for that.
So maybe 2 cents.
But yeah, but then you might want to supplement it with something a little more detailed for teachers, so that if they're the ones directing the game, they've got it.
Okay.
So. So yeah, so we get that in hard form. And again, just I mean, you've all hopefully played enough games that you kind of know what those look like. They start off with the setup and the you might even have the little thing saying what pieces are in the game, so they can just check to see if they've lost a set of dice or something like that. Um, this next piece I have not talked about yet, but we can't really do it until the rules are actually developed. And this is maybe incorporating a little bit of technology into this, but I'm calling it a companion presentation of the rules, some technology-based way of also presenting the rules. Um, we did Powtoon. That would be a platform where you could come up with a little animated video of the rules. Maybe for your six-year-olds or sixth graders, that might be a way to present the rules in a way that they'll engage with more than something on paper. But it doesn't. I mean, it could be a video. It could be an animation like a Powtoon. It could just be audio. Basically, the idea just being, again, educationally, it's always a good idea to have multiple modes that something's being presented in, because you have students that are going to be able to process written rules easily, and you're going to have other ones that aren't going to process those as well. So something that they could watch or they could listen to that would be just a different way for them to access the rules. All right. But that obviously, until you actually know what your rules are and they're pretty well set, I wouldn't suggest getting into this too much, because your rules will probably change, and I don't want you to build too much of something if you're not confident that the rules that you're building to are more or less set. But if you feel like you've reached that point and somebody wants to start in on a Powtoon or something, maybe to get it started, no reason to wait. Then obviously all the physical elements of your game, whatever that is. Is it a deck of cards? Is it dice? Is it playing pieces? Is it a board? Is it whatever your game actually needs? And I'm also asking for some sort of a container for the game elements. Most often that's a box, but immediately one thing sprung to mind would be like a Pringles can. If it's think about what you're having to deliver, and is there some sort of a container that would be appropriate for what you're delivering. I always get bugged when a game comes in a box that's like this, and you open it up, and all it really consists of is like a deck of cards and a pair of dice. Like, you really needed to put all of that in a box that big, but whatever. I guess they wanted it to stick out on the shelf or something. So that's basically, I mean, those are the completed elements. So that is a group. Will be what you submit when it's all done. But again, a lot of these, the design plan should be, I don't know, 80% at this point. Have you ever heard people say that 95% of all statistics are made up on the spot? You get it? It's a little self-referential. Yeah. So that should be pretty far along at this point in the game. The flow chart from our work at the last couple of weeks, that should be underway. And in conjunction with that, the rules, because you can't really be doing the flow chart if you don't know the rules of the game. And the rules of the game kind of need to be in place for you to know what you're flow charting out. So those two should be going hand in hand. And then, like I said, this piece is really the one that we haven't really addressed. And I know that many of the groups have already started creating the physical elements, or handcrafting them out of jade that was mined from the hills of Guangzhou. But I just figured this would be a good time to kind of go over that, since we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But hopefully nobody's looking at this and going, oh my goodness, there's no way we're going to get this done in the next month, right? So a lot of it is already underway, and the pieces that are still left to be done, with a month basically still to go, I'm hoping that's plenty of time to get all this stuff developed. So any questions? Yes?
So on something like the cards, is there any expectation of durability? I mean, you don't have to laminate the cards or print on cardstock?
Yeah, and again, if this was a production class, that might be more important. What graphic design tools are you using to create them? But I don't want anyone to go to a lot of expense to do that. If you have an access to a laminator at school and you've got an easy way to do that and you like the look of that, then I'm not going to stop you. But I'm not, this piece of it here, is not the biggest part of the assessment of this project. Honestly, it's these three pieces here are the main bulk of it. I want to see the embedded instruction. I want to see the well thought out plan. I want to see the flow chart of the gameplay that you worked through that, and so on. So while these are important and I want to see them and I want us to be able to actually play the games for real, I'm not as concerned about the final quality of those. So make them look nice enough that they're playable and understand legible and whatnot. So, all right. Any other questions on that? They're looking at naked statues over here. I don't know what's going on. Oh, your game pieces?
Yeah, I swear to God, it's class related.
It is.
You'll need a big fig leaf, like
That's what I said.
plaster,
I
but
said,
Penn Island.
so. All right.
Did you not get that at first? Because you were looking.
Penn Island.
She was dying.
I totally get it.
You got it.
There,
She's great. I'm on
There-
process.
there are
Sorry.
there are lists of websites that are real companies or websites where obviously the people that decided the domain name were looking at a series of separate words and didn't think about what it would look like when all
Yeah,
the
they're
words
all
went
put together.
together in a URL for a website.
Yep.
And there have been some pretty interesting combinations where if you just divide the words up a little differently, it takes on whole other meanings. Yes. All right, so I may as well go through this now because then you can work in groups for the rest of the time if it's meaningful. Unless you're here by your lonesome and I don't know what to say.
We want to get
He's-
going.
he's it. So, all right, so let me just kind of go over. So the forum for this week, I know we've had a little bit of a break from this kind of work, but this is related to the gamification project, so this is kind of the first step in that, so it's not just busy work. So there is a forum, and as sort of the first piece of this, in the forum, excuse me, I just want you to think about a mundane activity. In this case, if you're in a classroom, something that maybe is related to your classroom. If you're not in the classroom, it's no big deal. Something from work or something that you engage with regularly. So like we did tonight, but maybe with a little bit more of an educational focus. And then here I can pull up the actual instructions. So you're going to select a non-game activity that's either part of your daily life in classroom or elsewhere that could benefit from increased intrinsic motivation. So that's the key factor. We're looking for those tasks that the students just really have no reason to want to complete.
Is this what we're doing for like the last?
This is that other project. Yeah.
So this
I've
is the plan-
I've reduced the scope of it. So this is the gamification project.
Oh, okay.
So, but we're going to work it in steps, kind of like we did with the ID plan for the game. So rather than just throwing it all at you at once, get a little bit of it going here, and then we'll reflect on it and build on it. In the end, you'll be turning in the finished project. So
Is it okay if we maybe mentioned it in an earlier forum? No, the game.
the gamification.
The
Or-
game that we
Don't
picked.
take lawn
The
mowing.
game
We
of
already have
vacation,
that. We did
Yeah.
lawn mowing.
No.
Well, I don't know how many of you lawn mow in your classroom, unless
No,
I guess
no,
unless
no,
you're in
I
ag
mentioned one of my
programs.
games in one of the forums before it didn't have anything to do with, but it is a gamification game.
Is it something you already gamify?
Yeah.
No.
Can I use
Pick something new. Pick something new. Find
Never
something that the
asked.
students
I should have
right now.
never
Anyway, so
Rookie
step one is just describe the activity in your post. So what is the thing that the students right now don't really feel like doing? Number two, explain why the existing activity does not generate its own motivational interest. And that may be relatively obvious, but think through that process, because that's if we're thinking in instructional design, this is basically the problem. We're addressing the problem part of it here. So the problem is this activity, the students don't want to do it on their own, and you want to try to get into, well, what is it? Because if you know why they're not motivated, then you can push the gamification towards that piece of it. And then at this point, we're not looking for a final answer. Just brainstorm. Just throw out some different ideas. Think about what we did this week with the 4 game characteristics, and maybe run through the 4 and see if you can come up with suggestions for each. So which element or elements of games are you including? So that's the 4. So this one I'm suggesting a set of rules, or this one I'm introducing competing agents. And then, just like we did in our activity in class today, how would those modifications, do you think, increase the intrinsic motivation of the activity? So essentially what we did in class today, but now actually picking something from your classroom or from your workplace or whatever, and actually trying to address it. Ideally, I'd love for it to be something that maybe you actually can try out in your classroom for real. And because the one thing we're not going to really get in the game project is the I and the E part of the ADDIE, which is the implement and then evaluate. So ideally, if it's something that between now and the end of the course you could actually do for real, then that would allow you to implement it and to get some feedback on whether it actually worked. Did this actually make the kids want to do this thing more? So, but for now, I'm not looking for a finished product here. This is the A phase of it. Brainstorm some ideas, state your problem, brainstorm ideas, and then, reply to other people's posts, look at what they suggest, and then maybe you've got some ideas for some things that they might think of to gamify, some ways to gamify those things. So at this point, it's really just kind of getting as many ideas about the activity you're trying to increase motivation with. And some of those ideas will come from you, and then hopefully some of those ideas will come from other people looking at your thing and saying, hey, did you think about, or I did this and it worked really well, or yeah, you might try that, but my experience when I do that with something, the kids care even less about it, or whatever. So it's kind of like the alpha testing that we did with the games, only on a much smaller level. So that's the forum, basic typical forum setup, but it is the first part of that now smaller gamification project. And then honestly, the other part of it, no big surprise, is just to continue working on the group game, continue to collaborate over the week. You're mainly at this point working on the development phase, actually getting the materials in hand. The game project requirements, we've now gone over those. Make sure you've got a plan to address the elements. Make sure you're updating that game wiki. So for those groups, honestly, I haven't checked in on it in the last 4 days because I just haven't. But if you're one of the groups that's working in a Google Doc or something like that, maybe just at some point copy and paste that stuff over to the wiki. And especially if you're making any changes or additions as you're going along. So that's really just continuing on with what you've been doing. But now you have a bit of a sense of the timeline. We basically got a month left. I don't get the sense that any group is going to be in really tough shape trying to get their games done in a month. I've seen a lot of really good stuff already happening. So I'm not that worried about that. But now that we know that that's the deadline, we can sort of work towards that. All right, questions about that? Questions about anything? Space elevators. I always bring that up. It's my favorite little pet project. Yeah.
So group up in our own
Yeah. So
games.
it's almost 7 o'clock. So everyone has seen Dr. Bed that needs to see him. So we're all good there. So yeah, group up. Yes, to be honest, if a group feels like they've talked about what they need to talk about and you want to head home a little early, I am not gonna stand in
Oh
anybody's
my
way
God.
because
You wanna
We
get
are
out
gonna
of your
stay.
church clothes.
this is like the only time in the year I wear a suit. I've had to be in a suit for the last 4
Church
days.
clothes on.
One of my questions was drawn on, how am I gonna check it out? So I had to change the question. So
I like these chairs.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, they're good for-
You got the good one. That's like one of the, that's like an IKEA chair.
Twirly
And it's
Yeah,
stylish.
the cloth covered ones are a little, they're a little sketchier.
I had to do that.
Okay, go.